Welcome to Photo Finds. I am your host, Kevin Yee, and this week we are at Star Wars Celebration 6, which is the big Star Wars convention that happened this past weekend in Orlando. We're here for something specifically Disney, however, and this is a panel on Star Tours. Now, there's no news to break, but they were going over a number of secrets and going over some concept art, and it was really very interesting, so I thought I would share it with you. On the panel were Pablo Hildalgo, who's from LucasFilm, Steve Spiegel, who's from WDI, he's in the middle, and then you have Bill George from Lucasfilm on the outside. He was the, or from ILM, he was the visual effects supervisor on Star Tours. Most of the talking was done by Steve. Now, as we can see here, in 1998, they were already beginning thinking about revising Star Tours since George Lucas had announced that he had some prequels coming out. So they had gone through some concept art, and the initial idea was to do a pod race, because in Episode 1, that's what they knew was coming. And so they thought at first that the 3D glasses of the ride might be the pod race goggles. And one of the things they were going to do, one of the gags, was going to have a drill bit thrown by Sebulba come and break the glass of the window. They ended up not doing anything, however, because they realized that with 3 movies coming, they might as well wait and see what happens. So by 2005 comes this idea of the breakouts, that they'd have multiple versions of the stories, that they would let you go to different places, and the idea kind of evolved from there. It took a couple more years, and as you see, they've added a bit more to it, that third choice here, or that extra choice here of the interlude. And so you have Yoda and Leia, and at this stage of the game, not Akbar, but Bail Organa. It's hard to see here in this, but it says Bail Organa was meant to be the extra person of those 3 choices. Now, they had some concept art worked up, and they went and showed it to George Lucas, and such things as like the Hoth environment, there's Kashyyyk environment, and Coruscant, the original mock-ups, and then this interesting one for Naboo. Now, it turns out that they ended up not using this, obviously. They instead had the speeder go directly into the water all the way, but they used this teetering over the edge of a cliff idea in Hoth later on. And then the Slave One and Death Star concept as well. Now, there's Steve Spiegel, the WEI producer again, and this is the storyboards he kind of laid out for George Lucas, and you see it's built like one of those little kids' toys where it lets you flip around, and you could have your voyage unfold in any number of different ways, almost like a slot machine. Well, by now it's late in 2007, and George Lucas says he doesn't like to do storyboards anymore. He needs to see animatics or animations for it. So they worked up an animation of the first scene, and they showed George Lucas what it would look like, that they could actually fit the story that they wanted to tell into just those 3 or 4 minutes, and George said go. So once they got a budget and realized that they could do things like go back to Norway to film the Hoth sequence, they thought about it for a little bit and realized, let's not go to Norway because the weather is always so bad there. There were all these stories from Empire Strikes Back. So instead they went to Alaska to film some of the sequences that you see in the Hoth environment. This is a little bit more artwork. This concept has evolved. They had originally wanted to put this space station embedded in a big asteroid, and they showed concept art of that I don't have to show you here. This is the newer version of it. And here's the newer version of the Hoth ice slide now, that teetering over the edge. Now, it still says Star Tours here, and note the date, 5/16/2008. By the time it turns into 7/26/2008, the slides no longer say, the concept art no longer says Star Tours. They got their hands slapped, and we're told they needed to have a code name for their project, so that both WDI and Lucasfilm, if they're talking about it sort of out in public, in a cafeteria or whatever, then people wouldn't hear Star Tours and their ears wouldn't prick up. They wouldn't know what Lodestar was. So here, the rest of the remaining artwork, or much of the remaining artwork, says Lodestar rather than Star Tours. And you can see that they had the concept for the Death Star under construction early on. This is a shot of the simulator ride at WDI's facilities, actually, rather than one of the theme park production facilities. Now, this is the replacement captain, Ace, as his name is, and here's what he looked like before he gets his skin put on, and then later he gets his skin put on to him. And they knew that they wanted to have the captain be a little bit cocky, except George Lucas wanted someone who was kind of frail and uncertain of himself, and they realized, well, let's go back to Anthony Daniels. And so they have Anthony Daniels here reading with Steve Spiegel and Tom Fitzgerald, who was a creative executive at WDI, who was also involved in the original Star Tours. He was the voice of G29T, the first droid we meet in the queue room for both the old and the new versions of Star Tours. And they get Anthony Daniels involved, and he actually did do some motion capture work. As you can see, he had one day in the studio where they captured him for the one sequence of the boarding video. So this boarding video is going to have C-3PO walking around in it, and that was actually motion capture of Anthony Daniels, or capture of Anthony Daniels. And they only built part of the speeder. As you can see, it's empty back here, and there's a lot of blue screen in the back. And so as they add in visual effects later on, and there's Anthony Daniels walking around, then it looks a little bit more realistic. But that's interesting that that's a real Anthony Daniels there. Now this scene is not, it had to be created from scratch because you couldn't have Anthony Daniels sit down, and the C-3PO is going to need to sit down. Plus Daniels had gone home by the time they needed to switch out the pilots. So they described the process of getting C-3POs walking just right, and described it as holding a walnut between your cheeks, if that makes any sense, is what they realized Anthony Daniels looks like. Keeps his legs stiff. So here's the animatic of this interchange between the robots, and of course later they add a bit more of the overlaid detail. So a couple of insiders here. So this is Jenny Mulholland. She's an Imagineer, and she was here in the original version, as well as in the original Tokyo Disney version, and she's also the seatbelt person in the new versions. The Adventures Continue. So they went back to the same person. It's also true of the woman in the Q video of the original version. The African-American lady with somewhat crazy hair also appears not as the safety person, but in the cabin of the ride itself. A few more insiders here, several from ILM, and then Marianne McLean from WDI, and Steve Spiegel, that's our guy at the panel here, from WDI. And my wife had previously noticed him, this is sort of in that winning sequence you get in Star Tours sometimes, as a guy in the X-Wing pilot outfit who's always kind of laughing at us. And he explained in the panel that what he was really smiling about was he was just so happy he got to be in a Star Tours ride. They talked a little bit about the geese. Now these, as you may know, come from America Sings in Disneyland when they first created the ride at Disneyland. And they explained the body armor here. See, the geese were kind of naked in Star Tours 1987, and so their thought here, since this version of Star Tours is set in the universe before that they would have had more stuff on them that has fallen off over time, and so that's why the geese now have more armor plating on them that will have fallen off by the time we get to 1987. Now, they showed several inside jokes that are around in the ride and in the attraction, and this is from the queue. There's TK421, as you can see, written in the Star Wars Arabesh. There's the boot and plant from WALL-E. These are all part of the scanner stuff, security scan. And there's Madame Leota from Haunted Mansion. This is what it looked like when they were readying the attraction for opening until May 20th in 2011, when George Lucas and Bob Iger came out to open the attraction. Another couple hidden things. There's R2-D2 with mouse ears. And there's a floating carbonite of Jar Jar Binks, as you can see. This is also from the queue. Now on the ride itself, this is concept art, but on the ride itself you can see there's not only a Millennium Falcon, but something they pointed out I didn't know was there. There's also a Han Solo right here talking to the Stormtroopers, so I've got to keep an eye out for that the next time I go in the attraction. The spotlights form a hidden Mickey over here, and this is in the city of Coruscant. Now, they didn't say this in the panel, but I had taken a picture of this elsewhere on the Star Wars convention, and it's a scene from that same part of Coruscant that I've never been able to get a photo of while you're on the ride, because it happens too quickly. And now that I've got a photo of it, I was able to look up what it says in Arabesh, and it says Tomorrowland, so it's another Easter egg. And this one, they did point out there's a whole bank of hidden Mickeys here on the back wall. You can see in this one hangar sequence. Now, they mentioned there's a mighty microscope. This is a tribute from the original Disneyland version of the attraction. It makes no sense in Disney World, but in Disneyland, the ride replaced Adventure Through Inner Space, which had this concept. It was a prop in Adventure Through Inner Space, a giant shrinking microscope. And in the original Star Tours movie, that prop also appears in the original Star Tours movie. These are not my pictures. Now, they didn't say in the panel where you can find it in the new movie, but I already had known where it was because I had seen it previously. It's in the Death Star. So as you're escaping the Death Star, watch that tunnel on your left for the Mighty Microscope tribute. They did show a picture of what everyone looked like wearing their construction vests, including George Lucas and Tom Fitzgerald. And then there's that photo of the space station still embedded in the asteroid. This is one an original concept. You see it goes back to 2008, and it has the Star Tours logo on it. They also mentioned that they like to reuse models whenever possible that had already been created for the newer movies. Now this is a window washing droid in the prequel trilogy that they repositioned as a signal droid, just moving us around. This is a concept that didn't come to be in the pod race. The idea being that you could pay extra to sit in the area where they have floating shade, and that our pod would then fly through that shade, and that shade would land on us for a little bit and then fly off. But this concept was not approved. Nor was it really approved exactly what that cavern was, or that canyon was that we're flying through. They kind of came up with the idea that this is the thing that Luke and Leia will swing across later. Although one of the other concepts was that Slave One would follow us in originally. They explained that in the Naboo sea monster sequence that wasn't entirely digital. They had to get the slime effect going, and the way they did that was to use KY jelly, believe it or not. So this is another concept art of the Naboo hangar. They weren't sure at the time where the hangar was going to be located. Were we going to skip out of the water and go all the way up the cliff, was their kind of original thought. Here's something else that wasn't used. In the Coruscant sequence, they thought that we might have our shuttle come and hit one of these towers and knock it over, so that we would cause a little bit of damage. Another piece of damage that didn't make it into the ride was in the underwater sequence, having the water leak into the attraction. Now they could have done it, it's just that you would have gotten water in the attraction all the time, and over time that would have been bad for the attraction. So the Princess Leia sequence was real footage from the 70s that they had found in the Lucasfilm archives. They just needed to have new lips recorded since the words were going to be different. And so they hired an actual actress to come and record the lip sequence. And they showed her trying to match not only the head nod, but also just get the timing exactly right so that her lips could be used and molded onto the Leia figure here. They did a Wookiee splat test with their own animators at Lucasfilm, who were told to come up against this window at Lucasfilm and ILM and pretend that they're sliding off of it, and that was an interesting few moments. Now at the panel they didn't talk about all the tributes. There are quite a few more. Captain Rex from the first version of the ride is sitting in the queue, and also from the first version of the ride in the queue you had a radio station displayed, 107.9 K-Droid, and you can find reference to that if you're standing above that first droid and looking down. There's a bit of a decal around here that looks like K-Droid and 107.9. So they've really embedded a lot of details for the people who've noticed and cared. Our flight number is Flight 1401, which is in reference to the physical location of Walt Disney Imagineering, which is at 1401 Flower Street in Glendale, California. Over by Captain Rex in the queue, you have another reference to TK421. It's on the back wall, written just in letters. And then I'm tempted to challenge you to find the Enterprise NCC 1701, but I'll go ahead and give you the answer. It's earlier in the queue, something that looks like a dinner plate embedded in the wall, almost underneath the first giant view screen. You'll find the letters NCC 1701. You'll also find C-3PO R2-D2, actually, and they're kind of interspaced with each other. So what you'll have is N, and then the first letter of C-3PO, and then C, and then the 3. It's kind of interspersed between each other. It's a real hidden tribute. So I have finally one last bit of news to break to you. In about a week from now, so somewhat early in September, we will have a new book for sale called Epcot The First 30 Years. This is a fans book written by the fans for the fans. It features over 500 photos of Epcot. The vast majority of them are things that you can no longer take pictures of. So we really try to put an emphasis on things that you would not be able to see in the parks today. I'll have more information on this in an upcoming week. But once this becomes available, it'll be available for Kindle and for Amazon as a regular book, both in black and white to keep the cost down, or if you want to buy the full color version, you can buy that one as well. So those are for sale again sometime early in September, and as always, I thank you for paying attention, and we'll catch you next time.